الحمد لله الحمد لله خالق الوجود من العدم وجاعل النور من الظلم فمخرج الصبر من الألم وملقي التوبة على الندم فنشكره على المصائب كما نشكره على النعم ونصلي على رسوله الأكرم ذي الشرف الأشم والنور الأتم والكتاب المحكم وكمال النبيين والخاتم سيد ولد آدم الذي بشر به عيسى بن مريم ودعا لبعثته إبراهيم عليه السلام حين كان يرفع قواعد بيت الله المحرم فصلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى أتباعه خير الأمم الذين بارك الله بهم كافة الناس العرب منهم والعجم الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا والحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا والحمد لله الذي نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله أرسله الله تعالى بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا فصلى الله عليه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا ربكم أعلم بما في نفوسكم إن تكونوا صالحين فإنه كان للأوابين غفورا وآت ذا القربى حقه والمسكين وابن السبيل ولا تبذر تبذيرا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم ثبتنا عند الموت بلا إله إلا الله اللهم اجعلنا من الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. So today inshallah ta'ala I'm going to continue the series of ayat I was talking about from Surah Al-Isra, which are the equivalent of the Quran's rendition of the 10 commandments from the previous scripture as some Sahaba described. And today I'm going to continue on the subject of parents. There are 2 ayat dedicated to them. One of them I gave khutbah about previously, and this is the ayah next to that one. وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. An easy translation of this would be lower the wings of humility before both of them. That's the literal translation. Lower the wings of humility before both your mother and your father. Now what in the world does that mean? In Arabic literature, there are lots of figures of speech. Just like in English and other languages, you have figures of speech. You have expressions that aren't literal. Like people say things like, there's no use crying over spilt milk, or a leopard never changes its spots, or things like that, right? So the Arabic language also has a lot of these kinds of idioms and figures of speech that existed before the Quran. And the Arabs were using them all the time, these sayings. And the Quran used some of them. But Quran changed them in its own way. So it used them, but it also modified them. So خَفَضَ لَهُ جَنَاحَهُ was actually a figure of speech that existed before Islam, before the coming of the Quran, which meant he lowered his wing. He lowered his wing. And they actually had 2 different expressions. He lowered his wing, or he raised his wing. And to lower your wing actually is the imagery of birds. So let's talk about that for a second. A bird obviously flaps its wings, it raises its wings when it takes flight. But when it's protecting a nest, like from a snake attacking it or some predator attacking its eggs, it lowers its wings and hovers them over the nest. So the act of lowering the wings is actually the act of protecting the young. So that's what it's doing, or it's providing them warmth, and it's lowering its wings. The other imagery that associates with it is when a bird raises its wings, it's taking flight. But when a bird lowers its wings, it's descending, it's landing. So the idea of coming down is to lower your wings. Okay? So from it comes the idea that when someone has the ability to put you in your place, right? But they choose not to. So they have, in a sense, they have wings, they can raise them, they can take flight and show you how far above you they are, but they choose to keep their wings lowered anyway, as if they don't even know how to fly. So they're humbling themselves to you. They can act differently, and they maybe even rightfully may be able to act differently, but they're choosing not to. And that act is called lowering the wings. It also suggests that when you're protective over someone, when you're watching out for someone, you're lowering your wings for them. Okay, so being protective and being humble. Clearly, being protective and being humble can be done by someone who's strong and someone who's weak. Now, if someone who's weak is humble, it's not an accomplishment because they're humbled by nature anyway. They're weak, right? So their existence is humbled. But when someone is strong, meaning they have wings, and then they choose to humble themselves, now that's an accomplishment. That takes some doing, right? And there are plenty of situations in which you want to show someone what you're capable of. You want to be able to respond in a way that you basically your wings want to flap up, but you keep your wings descended anyway. And by the way, when birds feel attacked, and when they feel like they're being approached in a dangerous way, immediately their wings rise. That's when their wings rise. And wings rising for predatorial birds can also mean when they're about to attack you, right? So the idea of keeping the wings lowered is that you don't react so quickly, that you remain contained. You contain your emotions, are able to put yourselves in check. Now what Allah does in the Quran, by the way, there's a poet who talks about a friend of his who's always humble and nice to him. And basically says to him in Arabic, he says, you're always lowering your wings before me, but why are you raising them today? And what he means by that is not, where did you get wings from and how did you learn to fly? What he's telling his friend is, why are you acting up today? Why are you talking to me in such an aggressive tone? Why are you not your normal self? So this is the idea of the lowering of the wings and the raising of the wings. Now Allah says, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. He didn't just say lower the wings, he said lower the wings of dhul. Dhul in Arabic means two things. It means humility itself, but the image already had humility in it. Dhul also means to be powerless, to not have any ability. In other words, lower your wings in a way as if you don't even have wings to begin with. That's the kind of humility you must show before them both. وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. That's a very difficult thing to do, because the previous ayah already talked about how when parents can get to a certain older age, virtually everything they say can agitate. Everything they say you have 10 responses to in your head. Everything they say can feel irrational and illogical. Like at every given moment, not a word comes out of them that you don't have a talk back answer for, right? And if you don't say it, it's in your head. And for some people, even kids and adults, when they say it, either you're saying it in your head or you're murmuring it. You've got something, like the wings flapped a little bit, right? Oh yeah, you should talk. Oh yeah, what about you? And it's in your head, right? You're not the one to tell me this. What about yourself? And this kind of answer suggests that you haven't learned how to what? Lower the wing. Allah commands, it wasn't enough in the previous ayah that he said, be the very best you can be, even when one of them gets old or both of them get old. Don't let them even see a sign of frustration on you. فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. Don't scold them, don't talk down to them. And speak to them both of them in dignified ways. Speak to them in respectful terms. But on top of all of that, he said, this humility piece. Why? Why is this so important? It's important because we have to understand that we are, just like when we were young, their job, part of their responsibility was to protect us, right? And I told you the image of the bird lowering its wings, part of that image is protection. There comes a point where you have to protect your parents from themselves when they get older. You have to be protective of them. And how will you be protective of them? You have to be protective of their feelings. You have to be protective of, sometimes when they reach a certain age where they're no longer rational, their senility, they're in a senile age. You know what Allah describes as كَيْ لَا يَعْلَمَ مِن بَعْدِ عِلْمٍ شَيْئًا. Like they get to a point where after having known so much, now they know nothing. Right? Allah describes that as part of old age. They become irrational, or they become forgetful, or they become erratic, and all kinds of, almost childish-like behaviors. And at that point, you have to protect them from themselves. You know better. You've been in enough arguments with your parents to know that when you say this, it's going to upset them even more, and then they're going to say even more worse, terrible things, and then you're going to respond, and they're going to say even more terrible things. In other words, and these angels, they're writing everything down. So they're writing even the terrible things your parents might be saying. So don't instigate them when you know that saying something, you might feel like you put them in their place, you might feel like you won the argument, or you had a right to say it, But the larger picture is you sometimes have to protect them from their own selves. Because the angels are writing everything. Allah is watching over above and all else. So you may feel like you won an argument, or you told them, or you couldn't take it anymore, but the larger picture is their responsibility isn't just to look out for your well-being in this world, but also for the akhirah. And this goes for parents too, for parents to know when their children are being obnoxious, right? And you know your children, and I know my children better than anybody else. So you know by saying X, Y, and Z, they're going to react a certain way. You will know their reaction before they have a reaction. And you don't want, and you might even know that that's the kind of reaction you don't want. But you'll go down that path anyway, knowing that that's going to happen, right? So this is actually a problem. When we know that a certain way of approaching a subject is going to yield a worse result. And then when it has a worse result, then it's time for you to put them in their place. Well, it's not just putting them in their place, it's building resentment. And that resentment will eventually get to the point where they can't lower their wings anymore. They're fighting back against you all the time. So sometimes when they are younger, we create a situation that makes them incapable of lowering their wings in the future. And sometimes children create a situation where they are saying the kinds of things that are making their parents become more and more aggressive. So we need to learn how to communicate in ways that is diffusing. That doesn't escalate a situation, that diffuses a situation. There are different ways of saying the same thing. There are different ways of saying, why haven't you cleaned the dinner table? There's one way of saying it. Another way of saying it for a parent is, hey, could you help me with the dinner table, please? The problem is, when a parent says, could you help me with the dinner table, please? And the child is, uh-huh. Could you help me again? Inshallah. Could you help me, please? And then eventually the Incredible Hulk comes out of the mother. And there's a Hulk smash, and the PlayStation 4 has been destroyed. I said dinner table. Right? And then, okay, God, I said I'll do it. And then there's passive aggressive. This is sam'an, ijabatan. When you're not listening carefully, you're not listening well, you're not going to respond well. We have to become better listeners as children to our parents. And on the flip side, we have to know, mom, dad has to know, when you say it a certain way, like from the other room, could you get the dinner table? You know that they have the attention span of a squirrel. They're not going to hear that, and if they do, it's going to evaporate in their brain. So maybe it's better that you sit in front of them, eye contact, hold their hand, and say, hey, can you help me with the dinner table right now, please? Okay, mom. Okay, dad. And then there's a pause on the game, and they go and they help. You see, there are, because parents have had the same exact escalated situations with kids, and kids have had the same exact escalated situations with parents over and over again, hundreds of times. And neither is learning from what they're doing wrong. What can be done differently, right? So if somebody says, I've told you 1,000 times, why don't you listen? That actually means you didn't try, you said exactly the same thing 1,000 times and didn't try a different approach. There's not just a problem with the child, it's also a problem with the parent. But the stubbornness of a child should also be called out. If the parent is trying every possible approach to make sense to you and you're stubborn in your place, where's the lowering of the wings? Where's that lowering of the wings? And they shouldn't have to, in fact, you and I as children should understand our parents shouldn't have to come up with 50 different ways of convincing us. And we should, Allah did not just tell us to be respectful to our parents, He reminded us what they did for us that we couldn't remember first, right? And it's the principle that I gave you in a previous khutbah, I'm reminding myself and you of, we cannot pay back what the mother did when she gave us birth. We can't pay that back. There's no way. Our existence, Allah made it owed to the pains of our mother. So, yeah, she's being unfair, or she's being mean, or she's being mad, or whatever you say she's being. That right, or that favor she has on you, she still has on you. Now, let's always balance the equation. The Quran always presents a balanced equation. Allah says, stand up for justice, even if it be against both parents. Quran says this. وَلَوْ عَلَى الْوَالِدَيْنِ. Okay? So, وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. Even if you have to stand up for justice against your own selves or against both parents. It's interesting in that ayah, Allah didn't just say, stand up for justice even if it's against both of your parents. Because most kids, when they hear that, are like, yeah, I'm going to stand up for justice. Because every time my parents tell me to do something, it's clearly injustice. And so I have to stand up for justice. So you read into this ayah what you want. But actually the ayah didn't begin that way. Stand up for justice, وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ, even if it means standing against yourselves or both your parents. So who do you put in check first before you try to put your parents in check? Yourself. Am I doing something unfair? And we are very good at lying to ourselves. بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرَةٌ وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرَهُ. A human being has got pretty good view of himself, even though he comes up with lots of excuses. When somebody puts you or corrects you and makes you recognize that what you're doing is unfair or what you're doing is wrong, and they show you why and how. They show you why and how. And it's a very angering thing. I just got corrected. I don't like it. I don't like being corrected. And it's at that point that you and I have to show humility to Allah's word. The way in which I was corrected, does Allah consider that correction fair? And I just feel like it's unfair because I didn't like the feeling. You not liking a feeling doesn't make something fair or unfair. Is it right or is it wrong is what makes it fair or unfair. Right? So human beings, because we don't like being corrected, that also creates an aggression. But neither do kids like being corrected, nor do parents like being corrected. And so Quran says, your commitment is to what's fair, what's right. And there are certain rights that parents have been given. There are certain rights that children have been given. And children, even as they become adults, they've been given. And those rights change. When children are under let's talk about that a little bit, how that humility changes. When you are under the care of your parents, when you are no longer living on when you're not yet living on your own, you're not adults, not by Sharia standards, you're not adults yet, you're children, then you are under the authority of your parents. So you don't get to decide fair and unfair unless there's cases of actual abuse, where you're getting beat or humiliated or degraded. Those cases I'm not talking about. But if your parents are telling you to do the dishes, you don't get to say it's not fair. Or if they're telling you to clean up your bed, or if they're telling you to do your homework, or none of that is a complaint thing. Oh, I can't believe my parents tell me to do that. Because they are an authority over you. They have a custodianship over you, and they have that right. Allah has given them that right. They're providing for you. They're giving you an education. They're giving you a house. They're giving you even the toys that you enjoy or the games that you enjoy, the clothes that you're wearing. And the least and above and beyond all else, your mother gave you part of her body. She literally gave up part of her body so you could be born. So in that time when you are under their care, then you have to act a certain humble way. And children that don't learn that in an early age are the worst rebellious children later on in age when they become independent. And you have to do that on your own because you are a believer in Allah. Now when you get older, okay, now you're in university or you're old enough to have your own job, you've got your own apartment, you've got a life of your own, right? You make your own money, you don't need their money anymore. Or maybe they've retired now and they don't provide for you financially. In fact, you're providing for them financially. And the tables have turned, right? And at the very least, you become independent. You're not relying on them. You don't come to them and say, can I get those shoes for Eid? You get your own shoes. You don't need them to buy you a thing or another. You can get it yourself. You got your own car now. And at that point, the arrogance that comes into the mind is, I don't need you anymore. You can't talk to me like that. I got my own money. I got my own car. And then as if all this time, all your parents were a cash register, and now you have your own cash register, so I don't need you. You can't talk to me that way, right? So for children, we have to understand, even when we become independent, our humility to them doesn't change, but our rights change a little bit. What do you mean our rights change? You see, we are no longer under their authority in certain things. In certain things, we're no longer under theirs. Like the Quran, for example, describes, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ أَنَّا حَمَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ فِي الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. It's a miraculous sign for them that we have them board their offspring onto ships. Now, why am I bringing this up? there's an image in the ancient times of parents taking their young son, daughter, whatever, and they're putting them on a ship. Obviously, when you put them on a ship, they're not crossing a lake. They're going across the ocean. So they're going months and months, maybe years away. And they're going to start a life of their own. At that point, when they have a life of their own, they're not under the authority of their parents. Their decisions on an everyday basis, the job they'll do, the family they'll start, whatever, they can't consult back all the time now. They can get advice and wisdom in a letter, but they really have a life of their own. They essentially have a life of their own. The relationship of authority has changed a little bit. They're not telling you what to wear to go to school anymore. They're not telling you to take those shoes off, put those other shoes on. They're not telling you to get in the car right now because you're no longer under their custody. You're an independent human being. And when you're a man, for example, now you got married. Well, they can't tell you how to talk to your wife or to your children because you're independent and answerable to Allah for taking the responsibility of starting a household. You're not a child. You're a child to them, and you have to be humble to them, respectful to them, kind to them, serve them, take care of them. If they need anything, you better provide it for them. All of those remain. All of that remains. But if they start exerting that you need to be humble to me in the way that you raise your own children, no, nobody humbled you in the way you raised me. You had the autonomy to raise me. And now I have the autonomy to raise my kids. You had the autonomy in your marriage, and now I have an autonomy in mine. There's a life that you have that's your own now. What's happened, unfortunately, sometimes is, in some cases, in some cultures, and it's not even limited to Muslims, but it's certain cultures in which parents are given this total authority right across all spans of your life. The Quran is describing the relationship remains one of respect and humility. One of care. But Allah does not take one human being and give them certain rights at the expense of another human being. I can't take the rights of my wife away for my parents. I can't take the rights of my parents away for my wife. I can't take the rights of my kids, one child away for another child. Everybody has rights and responsibilities, and above all of them is Allah. Above all of those rights and responsibilities. So no one has full rights to say, no, you don't get to do this and you get to do that. And people often misquote incidents from the time of the Sahaba. Like the incident of Abdul Rahman, Abu Bakr Siddiq. Famously, it's said that Abu Bakr Siddiq told his son to divorce his wife, and he did. Right? See, the Sahaba, they intervened in the married lives of their children. Well, hold on a second. You have this one line that he told him to divorce his wife. Do you know anything about their marriage? Do you know what was their week like? What was their month like? What were the years of their marriage like? Do you know anything? You have these snippets of details, and can you tell about the real situation in the life of a family based on one or two sentences? Oh, I know everything there is to know about a family. No. If somebody said, I can summarize your entire personal life in a sentence or two, would you think that's fair? No. And if you just heard, hey, he told him to divorce, do you know the reasons, the conversations? It's a family matter, right? It's not a small decision. We know none of that private stuff, and we say, aha, you see, there's a text here, and that Allah. And by the way, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a Sahabi whose iman, compared to all of our iman together would be a speck of dust compared to his. But even then, he is not the legislator of this deen, radiallahu anhu. That's the book of Allah and the sunnah of His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to be clear about certain things, right? So what I'm getting at is there's this remarkable humility we have to show to our parents, but that does not justify that we take anybody else's rights away in the name of being humble to our parents. So for example, in some cases, people have come to me and said, well, I have a job, and my mom expects me to deposit my paycheck into her account every week. Okay? The problem with that, and then she gives me pocket money to go do the groceries. I was like, that's interesting. Is she not financially independent? No, she owns a couple of properties and they're pretty wealthy, but they expect this from me. And I have to do it because I'm their son. No, actually, you don't have to do that because you're their son. Our religion didn't say that. Your money is yours. You have to pay zakat on it, or she does. You have to take care of that money. You have to earn it in a halal way, or she does. Who's responsible for it? And when you die, that money is going to be distributed according to the laws of inheritance, right? If that belonged to her, then there should be no inheritance laws. It's entirely hers. Or it's entirely your dad's. Why is it being distributed? This one gets this much, this one gets that much. Because in this world, that was yours. Now, if a parent needs, ala ra'si wal ayn, absolutely. If they have a need. If they're not independent, absolutely. Whatever they need, even above your own preferences. I'd rather feed them and starve myself. I'd rather do that. But if they are independent, then these cultural expectations, they have nothing to do with the Book of Allah. They have nothing to do with the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's not just about parents asking for too much. Let's flip the occasion, the circumstance. You see, when people hear this, they're like, yes, I don't have to do anything for my parents. I heard a khutbah from the Ali Khan. Because everybody is greedy. They hear what will give them an advantage. We're not humble before the word of Allah. We are only interested in hearing what will justify the way we're already doing things. That's what we want. And this is actually putting ourselves above the word of Allah. Allah says, وَكَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ هِيَ الْعُلْيَا. The word of Allah is in the highest place. I'm reminded a long time ago, I gave a khutbah about the rights of husbands and wives. Long time ago. And I said one khutbah was just about the rights of the wife. Just the whole khutbah, 25 minutes, rights of wife. And I made a handout. About the rights of wife. And I did not give it to the sister section. And they were requesting, can we have a copy? Because they wanted to make a poster out of it, put it on the fridge, maybe even make a tattoo out of it, put it on their husband's forehead so he looks at it in the mirror every day, right? Maybe have an audio recording so when the phone rings, the rights of the wife are said. But I didn't give it to the ladies. I gave it only to the husbands. And the next week I gave a khutbah about the rights of the husband. And I only gave a copy of that to who? The women. But that doesn't help. I can only try so much. You know why? Because when you learn about your rights, you want to slap somebody else with your rights. Right? And but you don't ever want to slap yourself with your responsibilities. You just like slapping other people with your rights. That's not justice. Justice means that you stand for your rights and you also stand up to your responsibilities. Right? So here you are, I'm giving this khutbah, I'm talking about some cases of abusive parenting in some sense. And kids are like, yes, our rights. I feel good about this. Now I can justify how disrespectful I am to my mom and dad. How dismissive I am. How I've abandoned them. I can justify all of that. Can you? You might be able to do that to yourself. وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. You can make excuses for yourself. But can you really do that in front of Allah? And on the flip side, you've got children that are not giving their haqq to their parents. They're not giving the right to their parents. They're not talking to them the way they should. They're not giving them the respect. And you know what? Sometimes it is impossible to do that. Sometimes the best you can do is silence, because they're only becoming more aggressive and worse and worse and worse. So you're kind of trapped. What can you do? Right? But so long as you can tell Allah Azza wa Jalla you're doing your very best. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. So, he says, this is what I'm going to conclude with now. I'll take I know it's a long khutbah today, but I'll take a couple of minutes. وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. So, lower yourselves, humble yourselves before them, and then say this. Allah says, then say this. Meaning say this not to them, say this to Allah. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا. My Master, give them love and care, both of them. Give them your love and care, both of them. The way they gave me love and care, and the way they made sure I would grow and be nurtured when I was small. Okay, so now there's a reciprocity. That's a big word in English. There's a reciprocal relationship. What does that mean? Ya Allah, please give them your loving care. Because they made sure that I would grow and I would be nurtured and I would be educated and I would be protected and I would be provided for and I would feel safe and I would feel like I belong and I would feel loved and I would feel confident. They gave me all of these things when I was small. They gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have had when I was small. So there is a kind of equation here. This dua is in response to someone looking back and saying, look at what my parents did for me. right? Look at what my parents did for me. This is a scary dua. Because on the one hand, we make this dua, but then there are people who look back, and when they think about their parents, there are horror stories. What happened with they had to escape parents in some cases. And I've alluded to that before. Well, this dua doesn't apply, does it? Because it says, Kama Rabbayani, the way they ensured that I would be nurtured. But if the parent was the one that sent you to the hospital, if the parent was the one that was getting drunk and beating your mom or whatever crazy stuff was happening, if that was happening, then they weren't ensuring that you grow properly. So Allah didn't just give a blank check, make dua for your parents no matter how terrible they do. He didn't give that. But when your parents did their best, and by the way, you always will think that they could have done better. Just like parents will always think, my kids could have done better. Right? Parents are always saying, yeah, they're good, but they could do better. And parents are like, yeah, you raised me, but you could have done better. Yeah, we're human beings, we could all do better. But when we're thinking you could do better, you're overlooking all the things they did do. And you're overlooking all the things that they did within what they knew, within what they had, within the limits that they had. And some of our parents had a very hard life. It was very hard for them to make a living, to put food on the table. It was very hard for them to get up at 3 in the morning and stand in a freezing bus stop. It was a tough life for them. And they did it so you could go to school. So now you speak much better English than they do. That's because they sacrificed their youth so you could get an education. So you could maybe come to a different country or whatever else. So it doesn't make you smarter than them. It doesn't make you more advantageous than them. I've seen kids make fun of the accent of their parents. So what? What? Where do you get off doing that? Come on, this is you saying, Allah, show them your loving care the way they ensured that I would grow and be nurtured when I was small. Kama Rabbayani Saghira. And they give credit to both mother and father, and they both play a different role. Sometimes mom is at home. Sometimes. It's a modern economy, all kinds of different situations exist, right? But in some cases, mom's at home and dad's at work. And the child develops, mom's always there for me, dad's never there for me. That's in their head. Mom's always there, dad's never there. So I love mom, I listen to mom because mom's always there. She's always making the food. She's always making sure I'm okay. She's checking the homework. Dad just comes home and he's tired. He doesn't do anything. Why was he tired? Who was he breaking his back for? Did he enjoy getting yelled at by his manager? Did he enjoy taking the pushes on the train and the subway and on the bus? Who's he doing that for? Is he getting rich off of it? Who's putting the food on the table? Who's providing? And sometimes the service your parents are providing for you, you don't see it. And you actually turn it into a complaint. You're always at work. Yeah. And sometimes they want to be, but sometimes they don't have a choice. Because they have a family to provide for. They're both providing a service in different ways. We have to acknowledge what's being done for us. We have to become grateful for what's being done for us and what has been done for us in the past. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us fair to ourselves and to our parents and make us grateful for what's been given to us and stop thinking about what we should complain about, but actually think about what we should be grateful for. And may Allah Azza wa Jal not allow any of us to find ourselves in abusive situations and protect those that do find themselves in abusive situations. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-Hakim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salatu wa salamu ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. عباد الله رحمكم الله اتقوا الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا.